Welcome back to the channel, guys. This is Old Canteen, and today I've got a story for you that, to be honest, will give you absolute chills. We're used to seeing war through the lens of Hollywood. You've probably seen We Were Soldiers with Mel Gibson. There's a character in there, a helicopter pilot, cocky, brave, played by Greg Kinnear. But, as is usually the case, the real man behind that character was way tougher, more complex, and deeper than any Hollywood script could ever be. His name was Bruce Crandall, call sign Ancient Serpent 6. And today, I'm not just going to talk about flying and shooting. I'm going to tell you what it's like to be a father to your men when you're only 32 years old. What it's like to rip the seats out of a helicopter just to fit one more bleeding soul on board. And what it's like to come home to a country that calls you a killer. So, settle in. This is a long one. It's a story about honor, about mud, and about the skies over Vietnam. Let's start with the fact that Bruce wasn't even supposed to be a pilot. The guy was a baseball player, for crying out loud, a talented kid from Olympia, Washington. In 1953, he got that letter, you know the one. Greetings, you have been selected by your friends and neighbors. Uncle Sam came calling. He thought, all right, I'll join the army, play ball for the regimental team. But in basic training, he tried so hard to hurl a grenade for distance that he blew out his shoulder. That was the end of his pitching career. Instead of the stadium, he ended up in the engineers. And that's where fate took its first turn. The Corps of Engineers was overseeing aviation at the time. And a colonel said, everyone physically fit is going to flight school. Bruce figured flying had to be better than slogging through the mud in combat boots. He learned to fly fixed wing first, then moved on to those flimsy early helicopters. By the time Vietnam started heating up, he was already a seasoned officer. When he deployed to Vietnam in 1965, he was 32. For that war, that was ancient. The average grunt was 19. They literally called Bruce the old man. But this old man could run circles around any rookie. Picture their arrival. They didn't land at a finished base with air conditioning. They were dropped into the jungle near An Khe. Some high brass decided a helicopter base had to be built right there in the middle of the forest. Bruce, as the commander of Company A, had to figure out how to make the place livable. He was an engineer at heart, remember? He knew how to make things work. This is where another legendary character steps onto the stage, Ed Freeman. The big guy. Too tall to fly. Ed and Bruce had known each other for 10 years. In Panama, Freeman was Bruce's boss, but in Vietnam, Bruce outranked him and took command. He brought Ed onto his team with 3 conditions: no writing reports, no gambling, and a 2-beer limit. So, back to An Khe. No water, just mud. Bruce is racking his brain, trying to figure out how to build a shower. Freeman walks up and says, "Commander, I'll find water." Bruce looks at him like he's lost his mind. "What are you talking about?" Freeman grabs a forked stick, a literal branch, and starts walking around the camp like an old-school water witch. Bruce is laughing, yelling, "Get that stick away from my Jeep!" Freeman stops, points at the ground, and says, "Right here." And would you believe it? 12 feet down, they hit water. They became the only unit in the area with a hot shower. Bruce acquired. Read. Stole from the Air Force or someone else. Some external fuel tanks, painted them black, set them in the sun, and voila. They even swiped lighting from the officers' club in Quai Nan to light up their tent. Bruce was that kind of commander. He would have robbed the president himself if it meant taking care of his boys. They even had a python living in their tent, a real massive python that one of the warrant officers bought. Bruce loved to drape that snake around his neck to greet new arrivals. Imagine this. A green lieutenant walks in, and a major comes up from behind, puts an arm around his shoulder, while a 10-foot reptile hisses in his ear. "Welcome to the company, son." That snake became their mascot. It was painted on the doors of Bruce's chopper. The call sign, Serpent, stuck with him forever. But the jokes, the showers, the snakes, that was just the prelude. The real test began on November 14th, 1965. The Aya Drang Valley, the place they would later call the Valley of Death. Bruce commanded the helicopter company tasked with airlifting Lieutenant Colonel Hal Moore's battalion into landing zone. X-ray. Intel, as usual, dropped the ball. They pointed at a map and said, "The enemy is somewhere up on the mountain." Nobody knew they were dropping right on the doorstep of a North Vietnamese division. The plan was simple. Choppers go in, drop the infantry, fly back for the next load. 16 birds total. The first 4 runs were relatively quiet, but when Bruce led the group in for the 5th time, all hell broke loose. The radio exploded with screaming. Down below, in the elephant grass, it was a meat grinder. The enemy was everywhere. They were hammering the helicopters with everything they had. When Bruce landed for the 5th time, the chaos was absolute. His crew chief took a bullet to the throat. His co-pilot, Lieutenant Bean, took a round to the helmet. Crandall got back to base, unloaded the wounded, and saw his bird looked like Swiss cheese. But Moore's boys in the valley were screaming for ammo and medevac. And that is when Bruce Crandall made the decision that made him a legend. He realized standard procedure wouldn't work. Flying in there was suicide. He gathered his pilots and said, "Guys, I'm going back. Anyone who flies with me, flies with me. Anyone who doesn't, I won't hold it against you." The first to volunteer was Ed Freeman. Then the others followed. But before taking off, Bruce did something strange. He grabbed a wrench and started unbolting the seats in the cargo bay. Colonel Burdett, the air group commander, ran up to him. "Crandall, what the hell are you doing?" "Sir?" Bruce replied, not stopping his work. "Do you really think the infantry is gonna buckle up when we're landing under machine gun fire? They don't need seats. I need floor space. Without the seats, I can stack more wounded guys in here." It was a violation of every safety manual in the book. But the colonel looked him in the eye and said, "Sounds reasonable." The next day, the order to remove seats was given to every helicopter in the division, and they flew again, and again, and again. Bruce Crandall flew 22 missions that day. Most of them into a zone where the air was so thick with lead you could practically walk on it. He hauled ammo, water, and medical supplies in. He hauled broken men out. He landed in the grass, watching muzzle flashes just feet from his rotor blades. He saw the faces of soldiers, twisted in terror and pain. He didn't cut the engine. His crew jumped out to help drag slippery, blood-soaked bodies across the floor. He had a rule: never leave a living comrade behind. The dead, yes, that's the brutal truth of war. But if there was a breath of life in a man, Serpent 6 was coming for him, even if he had to fly through the gates of hell to do it. By evening, he was physically destroyed. He had swapped helicopters multiple times because they kept getting shot to pieces. But he pulled out 70 wounded men, 70 lives. Think about that number. That's an entire apartment building of people. But war isn't just about heroic saves. It's about the bitterness of loss that eats at you for years. Bruce's worst day came later, on December 28, 1965. That day, he made a mistake, or at least, he believed he did. He authorized one of his crews to fly a solo mission without a wingman. Usually, they flew in pairs for cover, but one chopper was in for repairs, and Bruce gave the green light for a single bird. That helicopter never came back. There were 4 of his boys on board: Jesse Phelps, Kenneth Stansel, Donald Grella, and Thomas Rice. They vanished, just disappeared from the radar. Bruce looked for them. He went up, again and again, combing the jungle, staring into the green abyss below. Nothing. No smoke, no wreckage. The Army listed them as MIA. The families were given the dry facts. But how do you tell a mother you don't know where her son is? Bruce carried that weight for decades. He knew roughly where they went down, but the area was under total enemy control. It wasn't until the 90s that he could finally go back. He found the Vietnamese soldier who shot them down. The man showed him the spot. They found the wreckage. Bruce fought to get those boys home and buried at Arlington. And he fought the bureaucrats in the Pentagon who tried to deny them Purple Hearts because the fact of injury wasn't proven. Bruce nearly tore apart a colonel's office over that. For him, the war wasn't over until he brought his guys home. Let's go back to Vietnam. Bruce's first tour ended, and he came back to the States. But something pulled him back. Duty, adrenaline, or the knowledge that he was needed there. More than he was here. He signed up for a second tour. This time, he wanted to command a squadron of the 1st of the 9th Cavalry. These guys were hunters. They had their own infantry, their own gunships. He convinced the general to give him the job, but the second tour ended in disaster. January 1968. Bruce was flying a gunship, covering his men. He saw muzzle flashes in the jungle, snipers pinning down American infantry. Bruce began his attack run, squeezed the trigger on the miniguns, and at that exact moment, his helicopter exploded. He says it was like slow motion. The machine tumbled through the air, slammed into the ground, and rolled across a rice paddy, shedding metal like a tin can. Just like a NASCAR crash, he joked later. When the noise stopped, Bruce tried to get out and realized he couldn't feel his legs. He lay in the mud, in the wreckage, with a broken back, deep in enemy territory. His crew chief, with a broken leg, crawled over to him, pulled a Thompson submachine gun out of the cockpit. Bruce loved that old gun and laid it on his chest. "Commander, if they come, we'll give 'em hell." They lay there and waited. When they were finally loading him onto the medevac, Bruce snarled, "Shut your trap and load me up, you idiot. My back is broken." They got him out. Philippines, Japan, then the States. 5 months in a body cast. He had to learn to walk all over again. But the most painful hit wasn't in the jungle, and it wasn't in the hospital. The hardest hit was waiting for him at home. Bruce was married to an incredible woman, Arlene, for 54 years. While he was fighting, she held down the fort, Picture this: Seattle, late 60s. The anti-war movement is at its peak. Their oldest son, an A student, comes home crushed. His teacher refused to teach him because his father was a baby killer in Vietnam. Arlene never wrote about that in her letters. She knew his temper. If he had known, he would have gone AWOL. She protected him, carrying that cross alone. When Bruce found out after he returned, his rage was cold. It was a betrayal. The country he bled for had spit in his face through his own child. They didn't wear uniforms off base. It was dangerous. The heroes of Ia Drang had to hide from their own citizens. After the war, life moved on. Bruce didn't break. He got his education, raised his sons, but Vietnam was always with him. He often talks about the Medal of Honor. He and Ed Freeman received their medals decades later. Justice moves slow. Bruce always carries the medal with him, but he puts it this way: I don't feel like I won it. It's not a prize. I don't wear it for myself. I wear it for the guys who didn't come back. He has another joke he likes to tell. On his lapel, right under the collar, he wears the pin for the Good Conduct Medal. That's the medal you get, basically, for not going to jail and not causing trouble. For a combat officer like him, who broke every rule in the book to save lives, that is the ultimate irony when young soldiers, Medal of Honor recipients from Iraq or Afghanistan, tell him they feel shy about the award, that they don't deserve it. Bruce asks them, "Do you have a Good Conduct Medal?" "Yes, sir." "Well, there you go. Even your mom knows you didn't earn that one. So relax and wear the big one with honor." Now, half a century later, Bruce Crandall looks back at that war philosophically. He has no regrets. He says the greatest honor of his life was commanding those men. He loved them like sons. And they loved him back. When he visits the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in D.C., he walks to panel 3E. That's where the names of those killed at Ia Drang are etched. And right there are the names of his crew, the 4 men he searched for over 30 years. He touches the black granite and says, "Hey guys, we did everything we could." And that is the essence of Bruce Crandall's story. Not how many sorties he flew or how many bullets his chopper took, but that he remained a human being, a man who, to save a life, was ready to disobey any order, rip out any seat, and fly into any hell. And that python, the snake on the door, it remained a symbol that even in the darkest places, you can find a reason to smile if your brothers are by your side. Appreciate them while they're still with you. That's all I've got for today. Stay safe out there. Signing off.